Hi, I'm Billy, the photo brother.
And I'm Dan, the video brother, and this is Stacktalk, the podcast where we talk about big trains, small trains, old trains, new trains, and everything in between. And today, we got a special occasion. This is our first time having guests on the podcast. This is part 2 of a model railroad planning podcast. You can find part 1 on the Model Train People podcast.
So you can probably guess that we're talking about small trains.
Small trains today.
Small trains. All right, so today we have with us Dennis and Sam from the Model Train People podcast.
Hey, folks.
Hello.
We're going to be talking about we just recorded, and hopefully you'll also see it up on their feed. Us talking about rail fanning and display layouts. So here we're going to talk about operating layouts and what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks, and how to build them. Like, what are the kind of things. So we figured it'd probably be good to talk to some model train people about that, right?
We're just video photo people. We don't know anything about that.
I don't know. What's this behind me? I don't know. What's this? No, I've actually been part of the model train people. They have a cool Discord server. Model train people. I've been part of that for almost a year now, I think. I think I joined in like January.
You guys should remember you had an episode of your podcast as part of our train-a-thon last year.
We did,
the
yeah.
beginning of this year, actually.
Oh yeah,
We did.
yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, your audience should already know who we are, but if you didn't because you're new and you have not gone back to listen to their older episodes, first off, what's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you go back?
What the heck?
And second off, if you don't, well, now you do.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's a great server. It's great for learning about model trains. So like they're great at like answering any questions you want to know. Like, hey, how do I paint this thing? How do I paint it? How do I build this thing? There's people there that can answer your questions, and people it's a very friendly server. Mostly younger people, so but there are a few older people on there as well. So
we don't limit it to younger people, but we kind of cater to younger people.
Yeah.
Yes, we are the next generation of the hobby.
People
exactly.
that know
like,
how
I think,
to
if I remember correctly,
operate.
it kind of stemmed off of the N scale cert. Like
It started with the guy who started the server, Eddie, who was has kind of stepped back to spend time with his family, which all the best to him for that. But he's not super active in there anymore. But he started it off because he was looking for some people in the South Jersey, Greater Philly area to do model train stuff with. So he started the Discord server and shared it around on Reddit, and it kind of grew into this great community. So.
Yep, and then he passed it on to me.
there you
And
go.
it's
And ironically, I met
welcoming.
him on Reddit, so yeah, full circle.
There you go. But today we are going to be talking about operating model railroad layouts. So, truthfully,
That's where you get the little tweezers, and you can't touch the side, right?
Yeah, model train board game.
That wasn't the
There's an
right way,
idea.
Bill.
That car doesn't go in that car spot.
You didn't put the grease in the axle box.
It's at the wrong door.
You didn't turn the car around.
Yeah.
If you couldn't tell, we've already recorded the other half of this podcast. So
We've been
might be
podcasting for like an hour and a half right now.
but yeah, so if you're
silly.
just joining us now, maybe go check that out first and then come back to us, or you can just listen
Come
to
see the deterioration.
Yeah,
Nah, it's a good show.
exactly. So let's start out with
What is an operating layout?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. So generally,
He
when
doesn't know
people-
what that is.
Generally, when people talk about model railroad operations, what they are referring to is typically mostly switching and kind of running trains in a manner similar to how the rail trains run. So an example of an operating layout would have usually a staging yard, which is kind of usually an unscenic area, which is where all the where you put all the trains on the track and you put together the trains that are going to run across your railroad. Once the trains leave staging, they get into the scenic area, and there's pieces of mainline run. There's areas where there are sidings with industries where people switch, people can switch cars and pick up and drop off different cars to deliver them or pick up empty cars or whatever. And then there are operating yards or classification yards or switching yards or whatever you want to call it, which is where people, take the trains off of the main line, pull them apart using the engines in the yard, put them back together in different ways, and then send them back out of the yard to go do switching or go to the other end of the layout or back to staging or wherever. Um, typically, well, not typically, but in a lot of cases, you'll run with a dispatcher or at least some level of control, whether it be a dispatcher or signals or, hey, guy, can I run to the next town? Whatever it is, there's typically some level of control that's, slowing things down and helping to break things up and to where you're running the train just like the real trains run, which is not a straight shot from one end to the other in a lot of cases.
So you're saying it doesn't just go around in circles?
Well, they
Typically,
can,
no.
but I mean, it depends.
That's
It
true.
completely depends on how you design your model railroad. You can, there are plenty of people who have operating layouts that are continuous run, and they only kind of use that in um just in display form. Like if they have an open house, they can have it so that the trains do run in circles around the layout. But when it comes, unless you're specifically doing that to like gain running time to simulate the time it takes to run between towns, you're not really going to be operating it in that constant circle around style, because like unless you're doing something like say the Chicago L or something, you're really not going to have any trains that are really running in a constant loop. So it's not exactly realistic to the operations.
A really good example of a layout that's focused on operations, but has a loop that is can be turned into a roundy sort of layout where you can just watch trains run in Railfan is Drew James's Canada Spokane and Pacific. He was in Model Railroader, I think, towards the beginning of 2024 or sometime. No, it was like mid 2024 because I remember it was at his layout for an ops weekend, and he was waiting for the magazine showed up in the mail like the next day. He was waiting for it to show. But his layout, basically the way it runs is if you look at the track plan, it is a big loop. It kind of goes back and forth down some peninsulas, but it's a big circle. But the way he does it is where the two halves connect is the staging yard. So trains go out of staging one direction and then come back into staging from the other side, still facing the same direction, and then they stop there again. And that helps him for restaging and resetting for the next time things are running because he doesn't have to do nearly as much to turn the train around. But it's
Right.
mostly it's designed where you're simulating you're going from one point to another point.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like even if it has continuous run, then you're saying that it's still basically you're trying to figure out a point to point, but there's some that, truthfully, mine in my attic here is a continuous run, but it basically is a point to point with just a staging that unites them, just a joined
Yeah.
staging. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I kind of want to. I kind of like to quote a line from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is, um, he did, you build bypasses too because people in point A want to be to point B and people in point B want to be in point A while avoiding point C altogether. Whereas certain people don't want to be in point A, B, or C, but just want to be in point D. But and in a way, that's kind of in a way that you can make model railroads that way, where you're modeling just getting from point A to point B and nothing in between. There's a lot of model railroads that do that, and they may include a couple points in between, but usually depending on what space you have, sometimes you're even modeling just point A or point B, which is the end point,
Yep.
just because you only have so much space to operate. And that's the number one thing. When it comes to designing a layout and what you want it to accomplish, you really do have to take your space and the scale that you model in and how much space that takes up into account, because that is your primary limiting factor when it comes to how much you can actually fit in.
It's true. It's definitely a limiting fact. Like that's, a determining factor of what you're going to do
Mhm.
when you're designing it. So, but let's get back to like just the idea of
Mhm.
operations in general.
Yeah.
You're trying to bring more interest to the operator of the layout, correct? That's like basically the general gist of it. So you're trying to
Yeah.
get, like, truthfully, the thing I like about it is it kind of makes it into a game. It gamifies it.
Yes.
It
Um,
it
go
like,
ahead.
yeah, you can either do it like, there are different ways to gamify it. Like you can have it so there's an Ingle Nook where you're just trying to switch cars out, or you're trying to add some kind of interest, right?
Yeah. A
Mhm.
lot of what it is people, to use Danny's words from earlier, because he's 100% right. People don't get bored with just watching a train going around and around, but they lose interest. So what adding in switching or adding in going from point to point, or what adding in, these different aspects of operations does is it adds interest. It adds more things for you to do before you turn the train off. And that kind of helps prolong your ability to stay engaged with it and enjoy it. At least for people who enjoy it. There are people who don't enjoy operations, and that's totally fine. It's not for everybody. It's and there's also different levels of doing operations, which I want to get into in a little bit, but we'll, you know, don't I won't jump the gun too much.
Yeah,
Really, you
so
can
I
jump
guess
the
I
gun
guess
all you
there's a
want.
lot of things you can add to the like what I guess I'm trying to think of the basic things you could do with the train. One is you can like just physically make the train go forward and stop. And there's more things you can add to that to add interest. So that could be like you're gonna add rules to, you gotta like blow the whistle if you have like DCC at certain
Yeah.
locations, go certain speeds, blah blah blah. So that's like a whole thing you could get into just with physically operating the train back and forth. You could get your fancy
Yes.
throttle that we were talking about in the last episode. Was
Yeah,
it
proto
what's
throttle.
the scale? What's it Iowa? What's the name of the
Iowa
company?
Scaled Engineering, and they have their
Hey,
proto throttle.
if you want to sponsor, we're still here. That's one thing. The other
Oh
thing
man.
is fundamental things. You can switch switches. Wow,
What?
flip switches or
Mind
turnouts or whatever you
blowing.
want to call them, right? Or and that could change where your train goes. It's
Rail
crazy.
Mind
benders.
blowing.
And then I guess the third thing is you can couple and uncouple cars, right? Which can add a lot of interest. Well, if you combine those three things in different varieties and flavors, that's basically all your operations. You're flipping switches, you're coupling and decoupling, and you're moving your train around, right? Is there anything I'm missing there? It's like the three
No, I
things.
think I guess the one other thing that I think plays into operations, what at least for me is a big part of it, is in a lot of cases, it can start out without it, but in a lot of cases when you start to get to a slightly larger layout with operations, you also add interaction with other people, interaction with other trains.
Yeah, so like
So I
scheduling,
guess
that
the
kind of thing.
the best broad way of saying it would be, with an operating layout, you really are trying to tell a story. So the
Yes.
model railroad is the stage and the trains are the actors. And you're telling the story of how a specific railroad actually operates, and doing it in whatever way suits your fancy, whether it's by um having a regular, like, modeling, say, Burlington Northern Santa Fe and their transcontinental line, or you could be modeling, say, a short line like the Finger Lakes Railroad, or even you could be creating a fictional railroad like Dennis's Balfour and Colucci Creek Southern. And it doesn't even have to be limited to modern day. You can model any specific time. Tell the story of the past, or even an alternate history of what could have been.
Or
The operation
hmm,
side of it it's got so many angles that you could approach it with, but it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to one specific thing because there are several rules when it comes to model railroading, and the biggest one of all is it's my railroad. I made it for me, not for you. If I try to do it to please you, it's no longer fun to me. So leave your comments at the
yeah.
door. I'm
Big
willing to accept criticism if it's to improve something that is a major flaw in the operation of it, but otherwise, it's mine and not yours. Bottom line.
Simply put, it's my railroad, it's my rules.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, like the operating how like this is a slice of some sort of imagined or real world that you could represent somewhere, right, in some sort of way. And I
Yeah.
guess another thing that maybe differentiates it from the rail fanning layout is still typically you'll have a switch that goes off and it goes off into something off stage staging or connecting with the rest of the world, which makes
Yeah.
your layout a part of a bigger world. And that can actually solve a lot of problems because if you're doing something and you're kind of trying to encapsulate everything, you have a lot of decisions to make about eras and what the weather's like and blah, blah, blah. If you're able to slot your railroad or creation into something bigger, then you can start to adapt the logic of that bigger thing to your small little slice of it. So if anyone plays D&D, if you make like a whole world and you start to think about the rules of the culture and societies, that can start to inform your game because you can think about how those rules will sort of propagate within what your players are doing and things like that. It's a similar thing with the model railroad where if you're part of a larger world and you're able to think about what those parameters are, that can make a lot of your decision making easier. So, if you're in New England or something, and okay, my layout is going to be attached to the main central or something like that, then maybe you have like old main central locomotives that are beat up on your little branch line that they sold off like 25 years ago because it wasn't profitable, something like that. And then that could also influence like the style you model in. It can be that kind of muddy season that's very popular to model in right now for those New England railroads. So it starts to like have a whole list of decisions that can actually, in my opinion, make it easier to make those decisions because you have something either real to draw from or a larger logic to draw from. Like, what's the guy that did Thomas the Tank Engine?
Reverend
Oh,
Audrey.
Reverend Audrey.
There we go.
Reverend.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe the finest example of the imaginary train world.
Hmm. Yeah, but
And I'll say
he
a lot of those concepts can, a lot of them are very heavily inspiring for people who do layouts focused around operating. But a lot of those concepts are very easily brought over to the worlds of rail fanning layouts and, more simple
General
or
railroad
less
layouts in
operation
general.
based
Yeah,
layouts. And it's kind of a part you can bring to any level of model railroading. So.
it's true. So, what would you say are so we've talked about like the benefits. Right? Are there any other benefits of operating model railroads? Obviously, yes, keeping people engaged, gamifying it. Anything else?
I
Or
think it's the counterpoint of the previous one. It's the size. You can get a switching layout extremely small, right? Like you could. I mean, we I think at this point we've all dabbled in N scale here, so you could fit a
Dennis
lot of
and
stuff.
Danny
It just
dragging me
like
into
such
it.
a time.
Kicking
Such
and
a
screaming.
right.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, like for me, as I'm getting ready to build a T-track model railroad, and that one is only about a foot to 14 inches deep. But you have foot deep shelves all over the place in houses all over. Heck, most of your bookshelves are no more than 14 inches deep. So I've seen plenty of people where they've been able to take and they just model a single town inside of a bookshelf. in either N scale or HO00 or any of those scales in between, and be able to have something that is operational and represents a part of the story of what trains do, which is moving goods and people. And they're able to do that and in just small spaces. So and that's an argument that a lot of people make is, oh, I don't have space for a model railroad. Well, yeah, it's because you're trying to make a model railroad that literally looks like this. You're trying to make a model railroad that fits inside of a pole barn. And you only live in a one-bedroom apartment. But it's like people say, "Oh, I don't have the space for a model railroad." It's like, yeah, you do. You just need to be willing to think outside of the box and compress the space you're in, which is something that I struggle with myself.
I think we
I
all
like,
do.
and no offense to Dennis, I think his BCCS layout, his 1x6 switching layout, is a great idea. But for me, it is a little more difficult, shall we say, for me to wrap my head around the concept of having a switching layout and still being able to keep it fun and not get boring after a while, or me losing interest in it and then it just sits there and collects dust instead of me actually operating it in a
Mhm.
way. Because I'm autistic. And for me, while I do enjoy running trains around, for me, I'm more of a rail fan in the sense of, yeah, I may sit in one place and watch trains for a while, but I also like to chase trains as they travel from point A to point B or as they're doing switching. I mean, watching branch line trains go down up and down the track and switch out industries and everything is one of my favorite pastimes and something I still do today. So, in that sense, it's like you're you have a lot more options of, are you modeling a branch line? Are you modeling a main line? How realistic are you having it? Are you doing compression? Like you could be modeling like a giant, say, an automobile factory. Automobile factories can have plenty of cars. They can have their own yards for storing stuff. You have the automobile loading ramps. You have the boxcar docks that bring in all the parts. You have the flat cars that bring in the automobile frames. Sometimes you have tank cars that bring in the paint chemicals so that you can paint the cars once they get there, and all these different facets. And like it's you can have a couple square miles take up the space that an automobile factory can take, but you can only model so much. And
Yeah.
that's where the
Mhm.
selective compression comes in, where you have to be able to bring it down to, okay, I'm only going to model, say, 2 tracks for the loading. I'm not going to include the tank cars for the paint or the flat cars for the auto frames. I'll say those are being brought in by trucks or something, but I will at least have a couple box cars come in or something.
Yeah, I think that's a really
Yeah.
good point about the selective compression, because that might be. I'm just trying to like rationalize what is an operating layout, what is a rail fanning layout. I think at least almost all model railroads have to be compressed in some way. It's just a
Yeah.
question of where you're going to do it, and maybe that's the difference. A rail fanning layout might compress the yards and the switching more, leaving more mainline trackage, and then the operating focus layout might compress the
The
main
distance
line,
between the towns, yeah.
yeah, and have
Yeah.
more switching and yard space relative to mainline. And that
Exactly.
might,
Like I pretty much on my layout took out all of the parts where it's like mainline running and nothing there. Like that's it's the each corner is just like cut,
yeah.
paste, slap them together.
So that could be one way to rationalize it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
So,
and
but
that just that decision process of how you want to allocate that precious space, because that's the thing that we're really dealing with in this miniature form is, we've got systems that are thousands of miles long, buildings that are thousands of feet long, that even in the tiniest scales you can't fit in like a bedroom.
mhm.
Yeah.
So
But
something's got to give.
but it is easy to just, put a little plug in for something. If you're looking for ways to kind of model things in a small fashion, go check out the Upload Express modelers. We are currently, me and Danny are working on things. Dennis is working on a thing as well. We are working on T-track, N-scale T-track modules, which easily join together, and you can put together with your friends, so you don't even need a whole layout. You can just build a little 1 foot by 1 foot box and model it, and then go to a show and connect it up with other people, which we are hopefully planning on doing at the Springfield show in January. So
Yep.
that should be fun.
I'm a little bit behind. So yeah, I'll get there eventually. So if you can there's those 3 bits we talked about. You could switch, you can couple, uncouple, and you can operate a train. Going like one step deeper than that is a lot of operating designed railroads will have areas where you can assemble and disassemble trains.
Yes.
Which is one of the other like fundamental kind of things you can do in an operating session. The other would be like switching in an industry, which is slightly different than assembling and disassembling a train.
Yeah, so you got kind of two types of switching. You've got classification switching, which is what you do in a yard when you're putting a train together, taking a train apart. You're basically sorting out, okay, this car is going to this town, so it goes on this track. This car is going to that town, so it goes on that track, and you're building the different trains that are going to or through or whatever those different town cities. Whereas industrial switching is more of, okay, I have a train of all the cars that are going to this town or these 2 towns. Now I get to that town, and this car is not just going to this town, this car is going to this track, which is, a paper company or a chemical company or a lumber mill or whatever it may be. And I need to drop this car off that way it can get unloaded. And while I'm there, I also need to pick up this car that's already been unloaded. That way there's space for them to get more cars. So you're simulating kind of the last mile sort of operation of the railroad where they're bringing, physically delivering the products that they carry to the customers that ordered them.
Or first mile, where they're picking
True.
up the raw materials or products that are being shipped out. So like,
Yeah.
coal trains, for example, those are perfect first mile, last mile. There are several model railroads out there that were designed with the idea of you have a coal train that picks up in the coal mine, and then it runs through your layout, and then it goes to a power plant or a steel mill or something that uses trains of coal, and that's where it terminates, modeling both the first mile and the last mile.
So I guess that
the Reading Railroad, right?
Yeah,
true.
One at
Danny
a time.
shirt.
Exactly.
Oh, what? I missed that. What shirt?
I
Oh,
said
by the way, the
basically just
shirt.
the Reading Railroad. Yeah.
The shirt. You can find us at the Rail Brothers. We got an Etsy shop. You can buy the shirt if you want. So, designed by me.
You just derailed the whole conversation, Danny.
Oh, sorry. You talked about my shirt.
Just don't derail the coal train. Just don't derail the coal train.
We're talking about coal trains, Danny.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't actually hear what you said, but so you could disassemble, reassemble, take trains other places, and I guess they're usually called jobs, right? Like there's separate jobs that you have on a layout, and one might be just as simple as you pick up this train and you take it over there and you drop it off, or you could bring it all the way around and say that it's like some sort of through running train that just goes right through the layout.
Yeah. So you got a few different types of jobs that you can do in an operating layout. In a lot of cases, you can have a through train, which comes out of staging. Sometimes it'll stop in a yard to drop off a couple cars that are going to somewhere that's on the layout. And then it goes through the whole layout and back to staging. That's kind of a through train. And usually that if you get that job, you're considered like a road engineer.
And
you could have
kind of like dodging other trains, right? So you're
to a degree, usually you're the train that other people are dodging, because if you're a through freight, you usually have a little bit higher priority. It's usually the priority list is usually passenger trains, then through freights, then you get the local freights, which is where you're going to from the yard to the town, and you're doing all the picking up and dropping off of stuff. You're delivering and picking up the products. and then you're a local engineer, and you usually have a local for one town or two towns, and it just goes out of the yard, does all the switching work in those towns, and then comes back to the yard for the yard crew to pull apart the train and sort it out. And then obviously you have the yard crews, which is they usually just sit in the yard all day. They've got a little switcher engine and they just pull trains apart, put them back together, and put them back out on the main line.
Like
And
seriously, I
even
love that part. Like it's just like it's something in my mind. It just releases the dopamine. Like yes,
oh yeah. Well,
And then I guess you also, depending on the complexity of the layout, you could have jobs that don't even run trains, like a dispatcher. But that's getting a little bit more intense, where you have to have a system for how to dispatch trains over the railroad. And dispatcher basically is the guy who controls how far a train can go before it has to stop and ask for permission to go further, basically.
And once you get
Yeah.
to that level of model railroading, like you basically have the functions of a whole real railroad all
Yep.
replicated in some sort of fashion, whether simulated off track, off, in staging or whatever, replicated in some fashion on your layout, which is pretty crazy and neat to think that you can do that.
Right, yeah, and it is cool, but at the same time, that does kind of start to lead into one of the disadvantages of having an operating layout is the complexity of it. Because, like, if you have ever been to an operating session on someone's operational layout, you would have it would be just like, say, showing up at a job. Like there have been some people where they are railroad crews and they have gone to these model railroads and they walk away of it and say, gee, I felt like I just worked a shift. And because you'll have your meeting and everyone will be assigned a job. There's not really any seniority unless that's incorporated. There's all different levels of jobs, and even with the jobs in and of itself, there's specific ways that sometimes those jobs have to be done. Like, who is it from or from the Around the Layout podcast? He's always using that same phrase of switch one industry first in this way and then do something.
Don Iris.
Yes.
Yeah, Don Iris has a very particular way he suggests that crews switch his paper mill, just because it's very easy for crews to get all sorts of tangled up in there if they don't start doing it in a certain way.
Right. And then of course you have you just have so many aspects to it, and um you obviously need to keep attention to it, especially if it's
Yeah.
on one of the longer point-to-point railroads where you're modeling going from a big city A to big city B with all the little towns and industries in between. Obviously, unlike, say, your little 4x8 layout, you can't just let the train run and then stop it whenever you feel like it. You have to pay attention to it. You actually have to pay attention to the signals, because if somebody happens to have signals, you have to pay attention to how the switches are lined up so that you don't go onto the wrong track. And you
And
have to listen to the dispatcher when they say stop your train.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not like my one outside where I can just keep letting it run while I cook some
Right.
burgers and drink a beer and all that other stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because if you make this big layout where theoretically, if this is in your house or something, like you're supposed to have total control over it, but if it requires multiple people to actually operate it to your intention, then that could almost start to violate rule one, where it's like it's my layout. Well, all of a sudden, you're not really designing it for yourself anymore. You're starting to design it for a group of people that you then have to make sure are entertained and getting something out of the layout.
True, and you have to think about things like aisle space and stuff like that. Like it's like if it's just you operating it, or just like me and let's say one other person, I can make the aisles pretty thin, and have it so there's more area for the train layout.
Yeah,
but if you have to have more operators and stuff like that, you have to kind of start to think, hey, I probably need to give these people some room to move around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and have enough friends around to operate it
exactly.
too, right? So,
yeah,
which can be a tough thing to to get a bunch of people in the same room at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Dennis's layout, it's a 1 foot by 6 foot layout. he's actually able to have people virtually operate his layout where
Yeah,
they
that's true.
like I'm in Evansville, Indiana. He's in somewhere up in New York. Um I can hop on my computer through specific programming and I can do certain operations on his layout while he's there monitoring the layout in person, just
Wow.
because of how small it happens to be.
Yeah, it kind of what we're talking about gets to, we were talking about one of the downsides of it. What it also gets to is something that I think is both a pro and a con of having an operations focused layout, which is you share it with more people.
Hmm.
If you have a desire to kind of share your layout, you can even with a small layout like mine, like Sam was saying, I have a 1 foot by 6 foot switching layout. It's basically representing one town. There are, I can't even, what, one, two, three, four, five, six industries on there for different cars to get picked up and dropped off. Um, I can do it by myself, but I could also bring it to a train show and have someone else run it. Or I could do like what Sam was saying and do it virtually. But then when you start to get to a larger layout, it's great because you get this group of guys that will come over every month or every couple weeks or every whatever, and you grow a real camaraderie with them. But if you don't have a lot of guys in the area, or if you just want to run the layout by yourself, it becomes a lot harder because it's designed to have 7 people, 8 people running trains at the same time. So it's not as easy to just it's not as much of an instant on like a more rail fanning layout would be, where you could just grab a throttle, crank up the speed, and just watch the train run around. So it's a great thing because you build this wonderful community of people who operate, and you do things like what I did. I got home from a few hours ago, which is this weekend. I went up to the Albany area and operated on 3 people's model railroads over the past 36 hours, 48 hours. And had a great time, met a bunch of great guys, met a bunch of guys that I knew from other things. But those guys who have those big layouts, they're not really meant, they're not really most of the time when they don't have people over, they just kind of sit, or maybe they'll take a train out of the yard and do one switching job and go back. But it's not the same as if all the people were there.
Hmm.
So that's a good actually way to kind of go into it is like how would you start designing something like a layout like this? What would you like start to think? What do you need to think about when
Yeah.
you start doing this? And like what are the
Yeah, I
ways
mean,
of operating things?
I think obviously we talked about this before, but knowing the space you're working with. Also think of it almost like a kitchen, right? Because kitchens, like you have to reach things just like
Yeah.
a kitchen. You have to be
Hmm.
able
Right.
to have space to walk around. So, when I think about kitchen, I think of how many butts this kitchen can fit. Is this a one
You
Yep.
are
butt kitchen? Is it a
such an
2 butt
architect.
kitchen? Is
Oh
it a three
yeah.
butt kitchen? Right. So almost that same way, you got to think about how many butts you want in your layout.
Oh yeah.
And kind of plan accordingly. So that's what I would say you got to start with at first. But there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So,
you have, yeah, you have to make sure that people are going to be going around. So, like, yeah, a person could usually fit in a 2 foot wide aisle if you're going sideways like me, because I happen to be 2 feet deep. But
Yeah, I'm
now,
in the two
it
foot deep
so
club probably.
yeah, you could easily do that. But unless there is a space on both sides of this 2 foot aisle where I'm able to scoot in and somebody is able to scoot out or something, it's going to be very difficult because I'm basically a log jam of my own making. Other people can't get past, and if they have to keep following the train, and I'm right there because my train's on the other side of the layout, on the other side of the 2 foot aisle, and I'm doing my own job, I can't just stop and let them get by for somewhere else in the world. It's so you have to take the space you have into account
yep.
and make sure that you are, because it's very easy to overextend the layout, wanting to cram too much into one space, either because you think that I need to model each industry as it is, or because you just like playing with bowls of spaghetti ever since you were 2 years old in your high chair. So, in that sense, you really have to take the space that you have to model is your number one focus, and you want to make sure that that space in and of itself is ready. Like, is that in a basement that happens to leak? Make sure you get those leaks fixed first, otherwise it's going to become a problem. You
Yeah.
might have short
Make sure all
circuits. You
your
might have a
asbestos is abated before.
yeah. So,
Sorry.
or if it's in an attic, make sure that it's a finished attic and not one that happens to still have the rafters showing through and the
Or
cotton insulation on the floor.
or if you're doing it in an attic, make sure that there's at least some level of climate control. That way your layout doesn't
Yes.
grow by 1.5 feet every time it gets
Yeah.
warm and wet.
Or if it happens to be in like an outside garden shed where a lot of people in other parts of the world, like over in Europe and Australia, or even in places in Texas, they have to have like in a garage or a shed or something where it's not part of the actual house because they don't have basements. Or like if it's like for me, I'm gonna have a layout in a working bedroom. I have to make sure that I'm able to fit my bed in there, my dresser, anything else like a desk or something that I might need, and have room to get around, but also make sure that if I happen to have anyone else come over to run my layout with me, that they can get over and they're not trying to climb over my bed or anything or trying to get through this space that I have that's being occupied by another space.
Yeah, so that
So,
accessibility and
yeah.
being able to access the layout is super important. So that's, you're kind of talking about making sure you have the aisles are wide enough. You might have places specifically where you can scoot past other people. In addition to that, I sort of mentioned this earlier, but I guess I think it's worth a further discussion. Is the assumption with the operating layouts, you're really handling the trains quite a bit potentially.
Oh, yeah. Not with your hands though.
Well, some layouts, some layouts,
Not
maybe,
with your hands until you knock it off.
Until you're not gonna, yeah. So, but you might be
Yeah.
there might be hand operated switches a lot of places with little hand throws, or they might not be, but oftentimes they will be. So that means you need to basically have within arm's reach. All your switches should basically be within arm's reach of that aisle, which
Oh, yeah.
is a big design criteria. That's maybe for a rail fanning layout, since it's really just going to be straight running curves and whatnot. Maybe not that many switches. You could get away with having some of your trains off in the corner, in this corner that's really tough to get to. So you just
That's
pray.
exactly where it will derail, though.
And that's exactly where Billy will
every time.
derail my trains every time.
Exactly. That's exactly where I will have.
I think it was a head-on-head collision in the corner I couldn't get to, but
he couldn't recover a car or something until like he took the layout apart.
yeah.
But yeah, if you have an operating layout, you can't put a switch back there because you won't be able. That's actually an issue I have at I'm a member of the Hyde Park, the Hudson Valley Railroad Society. That we've got an HO layout in the Hyde Park train station in Hyde Park, New York. And it was originally designed for
running trains. I love that idea. Sorry.
It was originally designed to be someone operating, and it had some switch machines, which is a little servo motor basically that you throw a toggle switch and it'll change the position of the switch. So you could have a switch back out of the way. But then after a while, the people who wanted to really operate the layout kind of went away, so it turned into more of a rail fanning layout. All the switch motors got taken off. A lot of the switches got soldered to the same position. That way they can't derail the train or anything like that. And so it just became 3 loops with, some cosmetic switches like we were talking about in part 1. But then now we're having more people come in that want to do operations again, and a lot of those switches that had the switch machines, those are now on hand throws or just flick. You flick it back or forth, and some of those are like 3.5 feet back. So you got to kind of lean over a big chunk of the layout in order to even reach that or step up on a stool. And then your belly's knocking over the trains, and you're picking up every bit of grass that you put down on the layout on your shirt. And so it's a big consideration. Whereas, like you were saying, on a rail fanning layout, say it's worst case scenario, something derails back there. you can kind of reach back there and quickly grab things one at a time, but it's a lot harder to get back there and uncouple a car or throw a switch or something if it's out of reach. So reach depth is 100% a big consideration.
So when also designing these things, when you're designing these things, how do you figure out how it's going to operate? Like, how do you like go,
that's the trick.
Yeah. Like, how do you like what like so I like yeah.
That's the fun part.
Be one with the railroad.
You say that jokingly, Sam, but in a way that's kind of the truth of it.
Yeah.
I'd say if you want to start looking into designing a layout for operations, I would say see if there's anyone in your area who has one already set up and kind of judge based on what they have done. But when it gets down to what you're doing, a lot of what you're going to be doing is trial and error. You put down some track, glue it all down, run it for a little while, see if you're happy with it. If you're not happy with the way something's running, pull up the track, rework it, put it back down. But don't start on big thing is don't start on scenery until you're sure the track work is good, because you will be pulling that track up and down and up and down if it's the first time you're doing it. Just because you'll find things where you're like, oh, I wish it did this. Or, oh man, I really don't like that happens. And if you haven't done scenery or anything yet, you have the opportunity to pull it up and fix it. And, you have the opportunity to learn what you like about your layout, what you wish it could do, and what you don't like and you want to change.
Yeah, another thing to look at is prototypes. That's a lot. Obviously a lot of people are like actually modeling specific prototypes, but even if you step back a little bit and say, okay, what am I trying to achieve with this layout? It's like, okay, I've got an industry that is, oh, there we go. Yeah, realistic.
Yeah,
I've got an industry that's maybe dropping
realistic operation.
Yeah, it's dropping. Yes. I'm dropping something off here. I don't know what the industry is specifically, but if you could look at a real railroad now with Google Maps and Google Earth, super easy to look at all the tracks that are out there in the entire Earth, which is
rail.guide.
Yes, that's a great one for more general stuff. When you get down to individual switches and stuff, Google Earth is a little more helpful. But
they do, if you're looking at just the current layer, they do show switches and industry tracks and yard tracks and whatnot.
There's also Open Maps, which does a good one too. But basically, what you're trying to look is see how the real railroad is trying to hopefully solve the same problem you're trying to solve. Yeah. Now, their criteria might be a little bit different than yours. So their criteria is going to be, how can I accomplish this thing in the least amount of moves possible, with the least amount of switches, the least amount of maintenance, and the least amount of time possible. Your criteria might be, actually, I want the most amount of time possible since my entire layout is switching. So it's always like a problem that I have to solve. So that could be like one way that modeling something strictly off of the prototype might not be ideal for a model railroad. But I would say 7 times out of 10, if you're able to look at the equivalent real version of it, you can gain some insight there. Because, a lot of times they'll run into the same problems that we're running into in miniature with, this, when I back this thing out here, I actually need another car lengths to pull into this other siding.
I'd go as far to say 9 times out of 10, having an idea of what the prototype would have done in a situation like that, and looking at actual rail lines and what kind of what looks right and what doesn't exist, it'll make you a lot happier if it looks like it could look right.
Yeah. Right. And the funny thing is, like, the railroads have done some crazy stuff out there. So there might be some things that you're like, oh, that wouldn't work. And like, there's that famous one that was like almost like it's like a
that's exactly what I was thinking of. It's what it is.
Wild. I guess that railroad just had a bunch of switches laying around. They didn't want to get rid of, or something.
They just didn't have enough room to make the whole Y.
What that is it's what's called a Y, spelled WYE, and it's a way to turn pieces of rail equipment around. So say it's facing to this side of my screen, but I want it to face to that side of my screen, and I don't have a turntable. So you go up the one leg of the Y and back down the other end, and then you're facing the other direction. But it looks like in that picture, they didn't have enough property to do one full Y, so they did like a star instead to be able to spin it all the way around.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be kind of fun. Maybe that'd be kind of fun to do in a T-track module.
I've seen people talking about that. Yeah. That'd be pretty sick.
Wires are already tough to wire up. Maybe I don't know how.
Yes.
That's valid.
Reversing loops. What?
Yeah, like 5 more sections of reverse. I guess maybe only one of them would be a reversing section. I don't know.
True.
Next podcast.
Figure that out.
Yeah, we gotta keep
so
moving.
when you are doing this, what are some ways, like, how do you keep track of everything that you're operating? Like, what are like some ways of doing that? Like we've talked about gamifying it, and dropping off cars here and there. How do we organize that?
Yeah. There's a few different ways. Two of the most popular are what's called switch lists and what's called car cards and waybills.
Mm-hmm.
So a switch list is basically, do I have an example right here? I do. Perfect. A switch list looks like this. Well, it can look like this. The basic idea is you have two columns. You have a column of cars that you're picking up and a column of cars that you're dropping off. And on that, in my case, is specific railroad names and car numbers. So I know exactly what car needs to go off of my train and onto that track, and exactly what train car on that track I need to pick up and put onto my train. But it can be as simple as boxcar. You know, if the pickup is a boxcar and the drop off is a tank car, that way you know, okay, I'm picking up that car and I'm dropping off this car from my train. It can, as simple or complex as you want. Those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum when it comes to switch lists. The other, like I said, the other really popular option is what's called car cards and waybills. A waybill is the piece of paper that the railroad writes up that says, this is what's in this car, this is where it's going, this is who it's being delivered to, whatever. And that if you make a little version of that for each card and you put it in what's called a car card, which is like a little envelope sort of thing, a lot of times made out of cardstock. There you go. Billy's got them. Yep. And it has the car label on it, what car it is, and then on the waybill it has where it's going. And so when you leave the rail yard, you get a whole big stack of those that has all the cars on the train. There you go. Perfect example.
He was prepared tonight.
I think you gotta say something for it to show up on the thing.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. There
say something. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look
at all my lovely waybills and car cards.
Pick a card, any card.
Pick a card, any card.
So you get your deck of car cards, which have the waybills inside of them, which the waybill will tell you what town it's going to and what industry it's going to and so on.
Like so. And then here is the car card. Yep. Here is the waybill. There we go.
Cool. And then with those things combined, you can look through and you go, okay, this card, this card goes to this train car, which is whatever, B&O 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it's going to this town, and it's going to this industry at this town because that's what it says on the waybill. And then when you get to that town, you drop that car card off in a little box, usually on the side of the layout, and you pick up the one for the one that you're picking up, and then you have a little pack of all the cars on your train.
Truthfully, it's kind of cool, the two different ways to do it, because in my job, I actually deal with some aspects, not of railroads, but of like trucking. And there you have, and I'm assuming Sam does this too as well. You have, a BOL, which is basically the same thing as a waybill. And I believe, I don't know if it's the same in trucking, but I know in railroads, you generally get a switch list when you hand it to you as an engineer, and that's how you know what you're switching. So I kind of like that there's both of these aspects of it. They both have, their origins and realism of it, of like, hey, here's like, the customer wrote out a thing saying, hey, I want you to go deliver this to, Taylor pork roll or something like that. Deliver these pigs to Taylor pork roll. That is a thing I have on my layout.
Which is cool how these bits of sort of abstract paperwork for a railroad become part of the storytelling. So if anyone lives in New Jersey, you know about Taylor pork roll or Taylor ham, right? So Billy's got that on his layout, and you get to service the pork.
Currently, a
drop off
box, but it is.
Drop off the pigs, and they become pork roll.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
But
if you want to pretend that you're the conductor, you use your waybills. If you want to pretend you're the switch crew, then you use your switch lists. And that's basically what those employees would have got.
So that gets the cars to where they are going. How do you figure out how to make trains not hit each other?
Well, you open your eyes now. Um,
usually that's where the dispatcher would come in. And for smaller railroads, you don't necessarily need them, especially like it's if it's a thing where everything is within the space and you already have everything kind of figured out. Usually you don't have to worry too much about it, especially on smaller layouts. But if it's on a bigger layout where it's going around corners and you have scenery dividers and stuff like that, usually it's going to require having some sort of dispatching system with the sensors where you can tell when trains are in certain blocks. And if you're a dispatcher, usually you will be keeping track of which trains have left what yards at what time, and using that to kind of know, okay, train 425 is at milepost 234, or train 26A is over at milepost 17. And you can usually have either, if you're old school, you can have the whole dispatcher CTC board where it looks like you're inside of like some sort of 1940s computer room with all the switches and lights and knobs and everything, and a little display. Or you can go into having like the computer style, like I'm trying to think of what they're called. There was a computer program that you could actually go in and actually see what the dispatchers are seeing on their computer screens. I cannot remember the name of it, but it's that program, and you can just use it. People use that as examples all the time to say this is how we see the trains and we know where the trains are. And of course, the dispatchers can always call the trains on the radio and find out where they are. Now, obviously, say if you're going back all the way to like say the 1930s or 40s or even earlier, the way that you knew where trains were is each station agent would see which trains are coming in. They'd give the train, it would be what's known as a track order. And so at each station, you'd have passing sidings, and each station would have a signal where they'd raise or lower the signal, and they could tell the train you can go or stop. They'd pass the orders to them, and it's basically says you have permission to go from this station to the next station. And then as soon as the train gets through, the dispatcher or the station agent will go back inside the depot, get on the telegraph, and wire the next station saying, hey, train 425 just left station A, heading your
yeah.
way at this time.
That's what's called what is it? Oh, I just had it. That's what's called
Timetable and train order.
yeah,
Yeah, the train orders.
train
But
orders.
but then
Which your two kind of general styles are CTC dispatch, which is centralized traffic control dispatch,
yeah,
or you have the track orders.
yes. And those are the main ones that you have. And even on the older railroads that are representing like the 1940s and 50s, usually you're going to end up, yeah, usually you're going to end up having a dispatcher and usually like a CTC system in some way or another, just to kind of make sure that you're doing it. So in a way, it's almost kind of like you're playing a game of Frogger, except with multiple frogs, but they're all on the same path, and you're not really having to worry about the crossing paths or something. It's a matter of trying to get the frogs from point A to point B without hitting each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know
And
for
I
mine, yeah, my layout, I've had to try to like, I kind of made it so it's kind of sequential at the moment. Like, in
mhm.
theory, it should probably be formalized into some kind of schedule with times at it. But right now, where my thing is at is I haven't quite figured out exactly the timings of everything, but it's like, okay, I know that train A should do this thing first, then train B can do this thing, then train A can pass train B at another that section, and you kind of have to work your way through it, being like logically being like, okay, this train needed to go over here, but this train needs to go through here. Um, so as I said, I know like I do it kind of a sequential way right now. I know that's
Yep.
not necessarily. I think it's kind of a step
It's
towards having a schedule or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's kind of pseudo timetable, and then
Yeah.
that would lead to what would potentially train order or dispatched. But the other thing I do want to bring up is that there is a th sort of a third style of controlling the train movements, which in a lot of circles is just called Mother May I, which is basically the layout owner. You say, hey, layout owner, I'm at this town and I want to move. And then he'll like walk around the corner and it's like, okay, you have permission to that town. And then you go to that town and you say, hey, layout owner, I'm at that town. Can I do this?
And the funny thing is that actually has a real world kind of thing too. Like a lot of like short lines work that way. Like
Mhm.
it's I forget like I'm trying to remember like some of the things, but I forget what it's called. It's like form something. I can't remember the
Form
name.
19.
Form 19.
Mhm.
Thank you. Where it's
I was
basically
just
like,
at a
oh
layout that had Form 19s today.
yeah, exactly. So it's just like, oh yeah, it's basically just a simplified version of that of just being like, oh, call up the dispatcher. Hey, I want to go here. Can I do that? Okay, sure. But you're
Yeah.
just talking to the guy right there.
Yeah, the Michigan Interstate Railroad down in Texas is big on that because it's in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, and you don't have a lot of trains. Like it's a little, it's technically a short line regional railroad where it's not like, say, CSX, where you've got trains going back and forth all day long. Usually, you only have one train going from point A to point B and back in a day. But every once in a while, you do have two trains or so. So you do have to still make sure that just in case you're not going to be interfering with anyone else unless someone hops in a locomotive cab and decides to steal it and take it for a joyride. But other than that, it's like, yeah, it's sometimes even with real short lines where it's just a single line, maybe two customers, and that's it. You don't even need that. You just tell the crew, hey, show up at this time. Here's the switch list is sitting on the bulletin board. Grab it, hop in the engine and go. They just go run it, come back, and that's it. They don't have to worry about radioing anyone or anything or worrying about hitting other trains because it's just that simple. It's like you don't have to play dodgems with anybody else. Just pick up the cars at point A, go to point B, drop them off, pick up anything else, bring it back.
Yeah, I
And
think a
that's about
lot
it.
of a lot of what we were talking about here has been talking about sort of bigger railroads or model railroads that
Yeah.
have multiple destinations and multiple
Mhm.
yards, multiple all that kind of stuff. A lot of railroads are a lot of model railroads are a lot of, and even real railroads are a lot smaller. Like there are whole railroads that just are owned by a factory and they just serve, a couple mills or a
The
factory system.
the
Where in that case you
The
wouldn't
Union
need.
Railroad is a
Yeah,
perfect
yeah,
example of that. It's
yeah,
owned by US Steel and it only services US Steel plants.
yeah. So
Mhm.
they're only going to interchange with a couple other railroads, and your layout can just be a steel plant, and there's an interchange track out there, and you just bring stuff to there, and that's it. And you wouldn't need dispatching for that probably.
Yeah.
You could basically have a couple people, like maybe you got two or three engines, and just making sure they don't bump into each other. You'll be fine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't even necessarily have to be an industry. You can have it so you're just operating an engine terminal, especially if it's like a steam
Yeah.
era one where all the steam trains required coal and water and sand, and they needed to get lubricated. So like the steam train would have to stop off at all these different locations to
Yeah.
get all that done before it gets sent out on the line.
Mhm.
So these operations don't have to be gigantic systems with dispatchers and all sorts of. They certainly can be, and a lot of the hobby can be just in dispatching.
Yeah.
Um,
One
but
of
they.
one of the I'm sorry, keep
Oh,
going.
go ahead. No, you're good.
I was saying one of the most interesting layouts that I ever heard about. Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to ever see it. I One of the most interesting layouts I ever heard about was a guy who his entire layout was modeling like down to an accurate timetable movements in and out of Albany Rensselaer Station on the New York Central. It was the layout was Albany Station, and
Oh wait,
it was
was this
doing
on a
switching in the layout.
Was he on the Around the Layout podcast?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was Bruce Ryan, who now he models. I think it was Bruce Ryan. Maybe
I
not.
don't know.
But
I think it was. I think it was
now models like the High Line, right?
Yeah, if I'm remembering right, it was Bruce Ryan, and now he models basically the High Line through New York City, which I'm super psyched. I'm gonna finally be able to go operate on that layout
Oh,
the
that's
end of the
awesome.
month.
But Danny, you need to like listen to that layout because you would specifically, I know, like with your thing you were going to try to do at some point with
the engine terminal, the Green Street
engine
one.
terminal.
Yeah.
Like he went into that kind of stuff in the podcast, and like go listen to that one.
So
yeah, and I feel like it's a big thing for the British model railroaders. Like a lot of times it'll just be a station, and that's the whole thing, and they've got the shunting thing out.
Yeah, well, my best friend's layout, he's in the bedroom on the other side of this wall in front of me. His layout, he's modeling an old Milwaukee Road branch line, and it's pretty much the end of the line on this branch line where the crews, they've brought in the last of the cars that go to this specific town. They do any switching that they have to do, tie the train down in the yard, drive the locomotive to the engine terminal and park it there overnight. Then the next morning they can come out, do any extra switching that they have to do. Maybe there's an extra car that got prepared overnight or something, and then they do their extra switching and head out for the day to head back to the main line. And it's that simple.
Yeah, the operation can be as big or small as you want them to be, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that does bring me to an interesting question: is when does a point-to-point railroad actually become just a switching layout? Because like you can have plenty of references to like how does say I'm modeling the Chesapeake in Ohio. How did that Pennsylvania Railroad boxcar get onto my layout? But switching layouts in and of themselves can be just puzzles or just excuses to say I built something just because I wanted to build something. And in and of themselves, they don't have I don't have anything against them. It's just like I've said before, they aren't as interesting to me just because I want to do the bigger stuff. But even if those little layouts and those little switching layouts, you can take those and incorporate them into just one industry. So you end up having them, and it's one small piece of a larger puzzle. But
I think something that I've been thinking through this whole time we've been talking is when it comes down to model railroad operations, whether you're designing a layout or you're trying to retrofit a layout or you're just trying to make things work with the layout you've got, it's a spectrum of how deep you want to go into things. How close to the prototype do you want to get? How much complexity to the switching do you want to get? Do you want to do any switching, or because operation could also mean designing a layout that, you've got to, stop at the signals, and you've got to blow the whistle through the crossings, and you got to stop at the stations, and you don't necessarily even have to do any switching if you're doing passenger operations. That's a whole nother level of operation. So there's a whole spectrum of how deep into this whole operations rabbit hole do you want to go, and where does that lead you? And really, it kind of comes down to figuring it out yourself. Where do you want to land on that line?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to gamify it, which I think is so. I've heard of people. I think Jimmy on DIY trains talk about using like kind of like a D20 or D6 system to start to add interest in operational scenarios. Like maybe this switch is out. It's it's frozen shut this way. You gotta just make do with that switch just the way it is. Or there's any number of things going wrong on the railroad, which that happens all the time. Again, I was thinking about trying to make some sort of D20 system, like a D&D campaign, out of a layout where the layout forms part of like the minis as part of like a sort of mech train universe. But that I never got around to that. But there's lots of ways to gamify it. It could be something formal like that or informal, and it doesn't need to be necessarily as systematic as what we're talking about here.
Well, you also have to remember that you cannot model, like if you're trying to represent a real railroad, you cannot model it scale foot. Because there are some industries, yeah, they might be right next door to each other, but then you'll have other places where you have a half a mile in between, which is like 2,500 feet. And you try to scale that down into like
Oh, we lose Sam.
Uh-oh.
187 or
Oh,
even
there
1 to
you go. There you go.
160. Uh, did I just
Oh,
froze? Oh no.
you're
Oh,
back.
my
You're good. You're
Back.
good.
You're
You're
forgot
back.
my
good.
camera. Okay.
Whew.
No idea what
Momentary
happened.
glitch. Technical difficulties.
Oh no.
I at least I wasn't recording that time. But but as I was saying, it's like when you take the 2,500 feet in between two industries and even try to scale down to say like 1 to 160 in N scale, you are still going to have a good amount of space in between them. And that takes up a lot of space. So it comes back to that whole idea of selective compression where how how accurate does this have to be? Are you going to model every single industry exactly as it is, track for track? Or are you going to just kind of model it slightly differently and be willing to move apart from it? So,
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Um, so I think we're kind of coming to the end of this podcast, probably. I think it's been about an hour. I do have one more question though for you guys. How, if I was interested in operations and you guys said to go try to find somebody, how do I do that?
Ah,
start with
that's
your
the
model
real
railroad
trick.
clubs. Start with your model railroad clubs,
Yeah,
or even the model railroad museums if you happen to know them.
yeah, I start with yeah, like Sam was saying, start with existing groups that you know of. If you're in the NMRA, talk to people in your NMRA division. If you're in the NMRA and you are interested in operations, there is something called the Operations Special Interest Group or the OPSIG. There, if you signing up with them, I think is free, and then I think it's like $5 a year or $10 a year or something to get their magazine every month or every other month or something. But on their website, once you sign up as a member, you have, I think it's signing free, I don't know. But once you get in there, they have a list, and if everyone who is in the OPSIG who has an operating layout, is welcome to put their layout up on a list of, based on location and how many people they can do and what their layout is and all that stuff. So if you're in the NMRA and or already in OPSIG, that's a great place to look. Um, but yeah, just kind of try and touch base with the people that you already know. And then I would say ask around online. If you're in forums, ask, hey, you don't have to be super specific, go like anyone in the area of, and then whatever your nearest large city. So like for me, for example, I live a bit south of Poughkeepsie, but I could go online and without doxing myself, I could say, hey, anyone in the, Poughkeepsie area within, 30, 40 minutes of the city of Poughkeepsie, New York, who has an operating model railroad. I'd love to come and check out your railroad and try and run some trains. And there's a bunch of forums and great places like the Model Train People Discord server
Yes.
where you can touch base with people and try and meet people and find things. And that's I think my favorite part of getting into operations has been meeting people and getting to see different people's layouts and stuff. So once you do get a foot in the door, you can start to bounce around between all the different groups of people, and you'll get to know people who know people who know people, and then all of a sudden you're operating at a layout that was in Model Railroader.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like I kind of feel like I'm kind of at the start of that progress right now, where it's just like, oh yeah, I kind of know some people around
Yeah.
right now that know it, like and stuff like that. But yeah, it's true. It's like it was kind of started with, oh, I need to get my foot in the door. I need to join a model railroad club. I need to, it was that kind of thing
Yeah.
of like, hey, you need to start. Like, I joined a model train people server. Uh,
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. No.
exactly. Um, I started a train podcast, those kind of things. Uh, but yeah, like it's like you kind of have to kind of like work your way into the social circles of it. So it's truthfully not the easiest thing I find to do.
It's a process.
Yeah, like, and you have to really, you do have to put yourself out there, and that is definitely, I know for me, it was kind of a step. It was like, hey, I'm going from being like I'm gonna just build my own little model railroad and it'll be fun,
Oh,
to just start to do stuff. What are you saying?
yeah, I had a Epiphany, which is
Yeah.
the other one of the other really, really good places to meet model railroaders and ask if people have operating layouts. Train shows.
Oh yeah.
If you ever see at a train show, you see a model railroad layout that's not really a rectangular shape, it just kind of winds back and forth, and the modules are all sorts of different shapes. That's what's known as FreeMo or free modular. That is a modular standard based around operations. If you want to get into operations, go talk to those guys. They'll know somebody.
Mm, true, 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 true. Now, if I got involved with one of those people, do they usually need do you need to have your own module to do that, or can you just be like, hey, I want to operate on your stuff?
It depends on the group. A lot of them, especially if you're you have your own stuff and you are starting to get into operating. A lot of the groups will be like, yeah, sure, come around at this time, or yeah, sure, we got some time right now. Put your stuff on, or even if you don't have stuff, some groups will be like, yeah, you can use my train for a little while, and they'll kind of coach you through some stuff. Um, some groups they do want you to specifically have a module before you can join, or in order to join and run trains, that you got to be in the process at least of working on a module. But a lot of these groups, at least in my experience, and I everyone's experience is different. Everyone talks to different people, and different people have different ways of discussing things with people and different views on things. But in my experience, a lot of the Fremo guys are really nice, and they want more people to run trains. They want more people to get into operations, to do Fremo, to do stuff like that. So they're usually pretty nice and pretty open with, yeah, I'll let you try it out. And some Fremo groups even have sign-up sheets for you to do an op session on their layout at shows and stuff. So
Yeah, I know,
worth an ask.
Yeah, I know there was a Fremo group that used to be that is around here, but I think one of the primary guys, moved away. But
hmm
they had sadly I missed the opportunity to do it, but they set up at the train show that was in my town, and they had a day or two where they're like, "Hey, come sign up, we'll show you how to operate." And it was
Yep.
like, "Oh, I really want to do that," but it was oh, we had some kind of
Just
family thing.
didn't work out.
It was
Yeah,
all on Thanksgiving.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, that would
turkey.
cause a problem.
Exactly. So it was
The
like,
Lonely
I couldn't make
Hearts
it.
Model Railroad Club.
But as I said, so it was one of those things. I was like, I know they had that opportunity, but I said it kind of I think it got one of the guys moved away during COVID,
Yeah.
so now it's not really a thing anymore. So, but cool. Well, I don't know. Do you have any more questions for the model train people, or?
Oh, I have infinite questions. You can go so far deep into any of these things.
Part three? Part three?
Yeah.
Part three, Danny?
We'd be happy to do this again.
Part one,
really enjoyed
part
this.
one, rail fanning layouts. Part two, operating layouts. Part three, Danny's questions.
But I think I got a job tomorrow I gotta go to. So
Yeah.
Billy, how are we doing time?
I think we're over an hour at this point.
Oh yeah,
probably good.
Probably about an
Okay.
hour 20 at least.
Advantages,
so we're good.
disadvantages of operating layouts. I think each one of us goes.
Who starts?
You.
Okay. Cool. Advantages. Do we want to do one each, or
Make it
That
short.
sounds good.
yeah? Advantages. It keeps your interest up in what you're doing, and gives you some more interesting things to do, rather than just watch a train run around. Disadvantages, it's more complex. There's more upkeep to it, and there's more to have to keep track of. Sam?
For my advantage, I'd say, you can definitely make it more realistic. because you're actually trying to model real things and how they actually work and tell the story. But at the same time, it can be a lot more complicated. And even if you're trying to do that in a compressed in a smaller space, sometimes it can become something like a spaghetti. So, which can be a lot harder to manage.
I'd say the benefit for me, I love the gamifying of it. I love the game of operations, of whether it's just like putting cars here, there, sorting cards in the yard, or trying to figure out how to get trains not to smash into each other and people be stuck in a cornfield. That's I love the game aspect of it. And I feel like that needs to be talked about more, like in a way of being like, hey, this is a game, guys. Like we can get more people into the hobby this way. Disadvantages, you generally have to pay attention to it. You probably can't drink a beer. You might be able to drink a beer during it, but it's generally discouraged.
The sipping and switching society,
but you definitely can't flip burgers while doing it, or be. It can't be just necessarily running in the background without having some attention to it. You need to be paying attention to it. This needs to be pretty or full attention. You don't need to be watching TikToks at the same time as this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny, what about you?
All right, advantages: you can meet people. Disadvantages: you might meet people.
Yep. There it is.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for coming on the podcast with the Stacktalk podcast with us.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for doing this collaboration with us. It's always great to work with other podcasts in the industry and be able to share our think tank of interest with everyone else out there and be able to share our fan bases with each other, because we aren't
super
we
fun.
aren't competing. We are not competing. This isn't a competition.
And that's the thing about Model Railroad. Truthfully, that you're gonna make me go into more about Model Railroading. We're getting it
started.
We're hitting it. But none of this is a competition. It's great. Like we all are sharing information and stuff with each other, like whether it's scenic techniques or how to do things. I love that aspect of it. If that there's really not that competition of being like, oh, my train's better than your train. It's there are rivet counters, but even then, I think most of the rivet counters I found are generally they're really trying to actually help you in some way. And usually they don't, and most of the time they usually don't. They'll just only if you ask it, and they have tons of information. So, I don't know. I think it's fun. It's almost a collaborative hobby, even if you're doing it by yourself that way.
Especially if you join the Model Train People Discord server.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's get one more in
where
there.
can people find you guys?
Yeah, well, we have like I keep saying, we have a Discord server, which is the primary hub for our community, but we also have a YouTube page where our and various places where our podcast goes up. We have
we'll probably
Facebook,
give you guys our link tree.
We've got an Instagram, we've got a whole link tree. So we'll shoot that over to you guys, and you can link it somewhere in the description or the show notes or whatever. But I said, we're based around the Discord, and we put stuff up elsewhere. So come check us out.
All right, hopefully Danny will put those stuff in the below. But I don't know what he does.
We'll make sure. We'll make sure you guys get it.
But so I guess I don't know. Is this? I guess you should also follow us in case
follow us on the things.
Yeah. Support the Rail Brothers.
Yeah. Rail Brothers, Stacktalk, you know the thing. Ginny, we're going to say the thing. Are we going to say the thing, Danny?
We're going to say the thing. All right, so it's been good, guys. We're going to see you down the line.
See you, folks.
Have a good night, everybody.